Hi again, my name's Hollis, I play as Riley and Ludell, and welcome back to my series on scripting NPCs, droids, and quests in LISPs for Star Wars Combine. Today we're going to learn about data types, which are just different categories of information that are structured in different ways. The reason we learn about them is because functions often have specific needs for the type of input, and they sometimes change the output, so it's important to know what you're putting in, what's coming out, and how to convert between them. It'll also allow us to do all kinds of crazy stuff later on once you're able to understand what the data types are. So this will just be an introduction. So to start out with, we have our normal function call where we have parentheses around something. That's called an expression. You don't really need to know that. And then things that you put inside of it are atoms. Again, you don't need to know that one. There's four main types of atoms. The first of them is a number, and you can split it into two categories. There's int, integer or whole number, so things without a decimal point, and there's float or floating point, so things with a decimal point. You will primarily be using number and int, and you may not even notice the difference while you're doing your functions, but just be aware. There's also string or pieces of text. You can use one set of quotation marks or three sets of quotation marks. The reason to use three is if you want to put quotation marks inside your quotation marks or do other complex things with the text, which we'll explain later. There's also Booleans. Boolean is an answer to a true-false question, a yes-no question. So for example, are they the enemy? Are they your pilot? And so it's marked as either £T or £F. And as a note, any function that returns a Boolean is marked with a question mark just to make it clear for you what's happening. And then the last kind is symbols. So these are again just keywords that tell the compiler or website to go look elsewhere for more information. So we have function names, variable names, and we have entities, which are unique data type custom made for Star Wars Combine. And there are also something called lists or arrays, which is a collection of multiple values. We'll talk about lists and entities on the next few slides. So lists, as you can see, it's a think of it as a set of boxes in a specific order, and each box has some atom, some element, some information in it. So you can have any type of information in it, and it can be as long as you want, or it can only be one element, one box. It always starts with the number 0. You need special functions to read what's inside of it and to put new information in. Here's an example of a list declaration. We declare a variable named myList, and then we start the list function, which puts them all together, and then we call nth of myList 2, and that just means get the second element of my list, so it returns tater tots. And here's some other examples you might use commonly. Lists are used a lot for if you want to have your character say something random from a list of options. That's a really common use for them. So the next data type we're going to spend some time talking about is entities. They're basically any collection of Star Wars Combine things. So anything that might have a rules page probably is an entity. For example, NPCs, characters, droids, items, race, faction, stock are all entities. And you can think of it as either a form or a table, where they each have similar information structured in the same way. They may not have all the boxes filled in, but depending on the type of entity, it'll have different information, and we need special functions to be able to find that information and return it to you. So this slide is more for if you're trying to do some complex things with entities, like, you know, determine whether someone's holding a lightsaber or a projectile weapon. So just as a brief overview, the entities contain information about the type and class and entity type, and that structure will follow the rules page. So you have the type here, etc. and then the type ID will be in the URL. If you need the entity type ID, you kind of have to guess at it using this function and the entity type name. So entity variables also include information about an individual. So in this case, this user ID, and it will include, you can access a lot of the information on the stats page, not all of it, but much. And you can do cool things here like getting the ship you're standing in, etc. Just a brief overview of entities and data types. Something to warn you about is that the say function can mislead you. So functions may handle different data types differently. So if I pass in an entity variable, it's only going to say the name of the entity, and that happens pretty typically. One thing that you can always trust is if you use pretty print debug or raw print debug, it'll always display the actual value, so it'll say it's an entity variable. So here are some examples. In this case, I use the equal Boolean, which asks whether these two numbers are equal, and if it is, it returns true, and if it's not, it returns false. And that shows when you use the debug, but when you put it in the save function, it takes that true and turns it into a 1, and it takes a false and returns it into a nothing. One that tripped me up a lot is that the get type of function returns a entity type variable, but the get type function only returns the name of the entity type. But if you put them both into say, you won't be able to tell the difference. If you ever want to know to test whether something's a certain data type, you can use any of these functions. That's all for today. Thanks for watching my video, and thank you to all the community members who helped me figure these things out. Subscribe to see the next one.